Kia ora everybody and welcome back to the Good Day Matrix. My name is Daz and I have the absolute privilege today of sitting here with Vanessa McGowan in the beautiful Tamaki Makaurau. We are not in Vanessa's house though, we're in someone else's house, and so I'm going to get that someone else to come into here and actually introduce Vanessa for me because I think Cassie could do a way better job. So come on in, Cassie Roma.
Well, thanks for welcoming me to my house.
Welcome to your lounge.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Hi.
Nice to be here.
Hi.
Hi. Fancy seeing you.
It's been a while.
It has.
I changed my clothes this time because I was going to get dressed this morning in the same clothes, and I thought maybe
People
I need
wonder if
an
you
update.
had another outfit.
I was just telling Vanessa, but this was our first ever interview at your home when we kicked all this off, so it's pretty special to be back.
Oh, that was a really cool interview.
Yeah,
Thank you.
it was.
Thanks for coming back. But this is about you.
Well,
So I'm a little nervous about this introduction today because I'm introducing my bestest friend. Vanessa McGowan is one of the most amazing humans on the planet. She is a badass bass player. She's played all over the world on big stages. She's got her own band, the Tattletale Saints, with Cy Winstanley. She plays with Brandy Clark and Sugarland. She saved my life more than once. And you are in for a treat, like an actual treat. You're a treat.
ow.
You're a treat.
I can't wait to hear how we have to save our lives in front of cars that are coming from the wrong way, but you know, that leads us beautifully straight into the first question of the day, because we talk about body, mind, identity, community, environment when we talk about well-being, because it's not just body, it's not just mind, it's all of those things all interlinked, which we'll talk about today. But something that has really linked the two of you together and really bonded the two of you is the Kiwiness and Americanness vibe and the confusion as you move across into different spaces and translating
all the time.
All the time.
yeah, and trying to navigate that into the different comms. So talk to us about that in terms of an identity piece, really, and how you manage that transition across.
I think it was in talking to you that I first thought of the concept of like the translated version, that when you are an expat living in another country, you start off by translating your my Kiwiness. You know, when I first moved to the States, I was like 100% Kiwi, had to translate the words I used for things, the phrases I used for things, the way that I asked for. I remember I used to often want sparkling water and dark beers. That's what I'd like to drink. And it was always like, dark beer, and the bartender's like, what now? Eventually you're like, oh, I've got to add some R's in there, okay. But you know, when you first start, you're translating your Kiwiness into American, but after a while of living somewhere else, you start to take on parts of that culture. And then you end up where, when you come home, you have a translated version of yourself again, because then you have to like lose some of the things that you've got used to saying, and you sort of end up, and this sounds like very dramatic, but you sort of end up where you're translating yourself all the time. And there's very few people that understand all the parts of you. And I was really lucky when I moved to Nashville that I moved with my bandmate Cy, who's a Kiwi, he's from the North Shore as well. So we had each other, and we could always, you know, I remember calling him one day and being like, man, I really feel like some chi. And he's just like, okay, cool, like cool story, bro. And I'm like, yeah, I can't get any, but I just wanted to tell someone who knew what that was. And when I met Cassie, it was like very quickly we realized that we had the same, we both translated between the two cultures. And so we can talk about, you know, ads from the 90s in New Zealand, but we can also talk about like pop culture in the States. And I think translating yourself for the people you're around it's a fun thing to be from two different places, but it's also like sort of exhausting. So when you meet someone that you can just like say anything that comes into your head and they're probably going to understand it, it was a really I think it fast-tracked our friendship a lot. And we also had a lot in common as far as what's important to us. But, right, like the translated, it sounds so sort of trivial, but like just knowing food and drinks and jokes and places.
It was instantaneous.
Yeah.
It was, and we've talked about this a few times, like it's not often in life where you meet somebody, especially as an adult, because it takes so long as adults to navigate work and life and family and distance. And for us, we had like a 30-minute phone call set up, and the first one was 90 minutes, and then it was 90 minutes, and it was like there was no translation of any part of self and the wild weirdness that just meets.
I love it. Quintessential weirdos.
Yeah.
Just get each other.
Yeah, but and what we found too is like there's this beauty in sitting in silence as well. Like we can talk for 2 days straight, probably annoy the shit out of our partners, but then just sit in silence and very companionable and enjoy it. So
I feel like that's a creative vibe also, that people can sit in silence comfortably, if you know what I mean, and have the patience to sit and give space. I think it's a different, when you don't have that sort of creative element, you kind of fill space, or you have to use your word count of the day. But I think, as my husband will say about me, you don't use your word count of the day.
140 characters plus a hashtag, that's all you get.
And it doesn't take it in anyway. But I think it's a really understated thing with creativity as well, is that you have the patience to give space to let things brew, and
that's where the best ideas happen too. Is for me at least, is usually when I do talk a lot, and so in those moments of quiet, which sometimes are few and far between, that's when things process and things come together, and all those conversations and all those ideas like find a focus point.
Yeah.
Speaking of creatively doing things, I'm gonna creatively extricate myself.
Thank you very much for joining us
in the morning and awkwardly bye.
Thanks, Cassie. So tell us about your whakapapa. Tell us about where you started and what got you to go over to Nashville and do that move, and where you've started from here in Aotearoa.
I translated Americaness. So I'm from the North Shore of Auckland and grew up playing music on the shore, like all the orchestras and little music groups. Musicana was my first little music group that I played in. Went to Northcote College and got involved with jazz there. I was playing classical music, but I started playing jazz as part of the big band at school. Northcote was very known for its jazz program.
Yeah.
So I started playing bass, and then went to Auckland Uni and did my undergraduate degree in jazz bass. And then I was playing in Auckland, and I had a few residencies with Caitlin Smith, who I played with for several years, and I was playing in the Roger Fox big band, and a teacher who, a bass player, came out to do a tour with the Fox band, Tom Warrington, and because a big band only has one bass player, I think I played the first chunk of the concert every night, like there was like 2 sets, but I was out on tour with him. And I got to know him through those tours and really liked him. The thing when I think once you're at that professional level with music, finding a teacher of some capacity is far more about finding a mentor. Because I could play bass, like I knew how to physically play the instrument. What I needed to figure out next was, what is the point of me playing bass? And like, what is this going to mean for my life, and what kind of life do I want? And not that I think I probably wasn't conscious of those being the issues yet. I was more just like, I want to play more bass and better people, and because I was 20, 21. So anyway, I met Tom Warrington. Ultimately, he offered me a scholarship to go and study with him in the States. So he offered it to me once, and I was like, I just got out of uni, like I'm real sick of school, I just need a break. So I had one more year of working in Auckland, and I was teaching bass at 6 different high schools around the shore in the city, and I was playing a lot of gigs. And then he came back a year later and he said, what are you doing now? And I looked around and I was like, well, I'm kind of doing exactly the same thing as I was last year, and it's great, but I have this feeling like if I don't make a big change now, I might be doing this for 30 years. And I loved it, and it wasn't that it was a bad life, it's just that I kind of wanted to see what more was out there, and how much better I could get at music, and how the kind of opportunities, people I could play with, places I could visit. I didn't leave New Zealand because I was unhappy here. I just left because I wanted to see what more was out there, And so I went over to Las Vegas, where he was teaching, to UNLV, and I did a master's degree, master's in jazz bass. And then living in Vegas was crazy. I spent the first year trying to find a way to leave. I was like, I don't want to live here. And then I spent the second year thinking, well, I'm nearly finished, and it's a free degree. And I loved working. I loved learning from Tom. He he was the first kind of mentor in my life that really got me thinking about the greater meaning of things, and that it's not about just playing music. It's about what you're expressing with the music and what you're doing in a greater the greater level. And he was awesome, and we spent most of my lessons not playing, just talking about life, which was exactly what I needed. So in the meantime, I had reconnected with Sai, who I'd met in high school while in Auckland, at a different high school, and he was living in London. So we were a couple for 5 years.
Yeah.
So at the end of my degree, I moved to London to be with him.
Oh, wow.
So I was there for almost 5 years in London, and we started playing music together. I started playing country music for the first time. I'd been just a jazz snob for the bulk of my life so far. Started playing country. He got me singing, which totally has changed my career. I'll be hired to do some bass backing vocal job that I'm, it's like half and half, and I frequently think if it wasn't for Sai, I wouldn't be doing this, because he encouraged me to do something that I was afraid of, which was singing on a microphone. So we spent time there. We started our first band together. Then we came back to New Zealand. Then we split up. Then we decided to stay a band, which was a good call, but a difficult one.
Yeah.
We had all these gigs together. All of our income was joint projects. We had residencies, we had jazz gigs, we had corporate events, and we were we suck as a couple, but we're really good at music together.
Yeah.
So we stayed a band after, we're really, really good friends now, and I think people look at us and go how do you do that? How do you stay working with your ex? But it wasn't immediately roses, it took some time, but we did stay really close, became close again. And then we moved to Nashville to be a band over there and to work as session players and build our individual careers and also, as a band. So, and then that was 2014. So been in Nashville for a good 8 years. And yeah, it's a wild journey of pursuing music all around the world.
Wow. It's literally, as you're part of Sugarland, and like I said, I love country music. It's that song, Something More. There's got to be something more. When you were having a look at it going, hang on, I've done the same thing for the last year.
Right.
Is this going to be the next 30? Or is there something more that I need to have a look at? And that's a really important part of wellbeing hands down, I just want people to be happy. It doesn't matter, if you were happy to do that for the next 30 years,
right,
that's beautiful. But if there's that little itch or there's something else that you haven't quite found yet, or whether that's just joining another community group, or whether it is pushing past where you are into the next stage, or, it's so important.
It doesn't mean leaving. It doesn't, I always think that people that didn't leave sort of assume that the expats look down on them somehow, oh, you're still here doing the same. It's no, it's not that. It's just that I didn't want to have kids. I knew that I wasn't going to raise a family here. I mean, if I'd wanted to have a family, I think New Zealand would have been the perfect place to do that. I can't imagine raising kids somewhere else. I would want to do that, but I didn't want to have a family. I knew I wanted something different, and I don't begrudge the people that didn't. I just knew it wasn't me,
Yeah. Which is a really, again, just important thing to know about yourself and not base your decisions off what other people's expectations are.
Yeah. Which, I certainly wasn't that confident about it then. It's looking back that I'm oh, this is what that meant.
Yeah.
No. I wasn't a 21-year-old, wisdom guru.
Yeah. I have all of the answers.
I know exactly what I want to do in my life. No.
Follow this path. So we'll move on to body. And do you have any daily routines or activities that you like to do for your body to get yourself moving, or sleeping or eating, anything around body that sort of takes care of that for you?
I do try to work out pretty consistently, partly because I feel much worse when I don't, and partly because music is actually a very physical job, and if I don't keep my body strong, then I can't, not only can I not schlep my heavy gear around, but I also physically can't play, it's actually the first Sugarland gig I did, I joined that band. I had 5 days notice that I was going to go out. I'd been in another band opening for them for half a tour, and then so with Brandy Clark, who I play for as well. Yeah. And we'd been the opening band for 6 weeks, and we'd just finished the first half of the tour. They had a different opening band for the second half, and so I'd left, gone back. Oh, I've got a break now, thank God.
I'm out.
Mum had come over to visit from New Zealand, and then I got this call from the manager of Brandy is the same woman who manages Jennifer, so she knows me really well, and she called me and she was like, could you come? Is it possible that in 6 days you could come out and play? Like, you've heard the Sugarland set for 6 weeks, like you must know it. And I'm like, not well enough to play it, like I was sitting on the side of stage with a bourbon, like I wasn't like paying attention to the songs. But I got this call to play for them because someone basically got fired. And I had 5 days to learn the set, and I remember the first day of the show, I was like thinking about my protein intakes, like I was thinking about when I should eat, the kind of energy, like it was because I felt like to have my brain and my body be able to do this job at this, like, it's, it was an arena tour, it's in front of tens of thousands of people, and I had, I think I had one rehearsal, and I'd learned the set like in between trying to do stuff with mum while she was visiting. So music, yes, it's like a job where you can have a drink on stage, but like a lot of it, I think the best players think of it like they're an athlete. They think about the way that the strength of their body, they think about the clarity of mind, they think about the energy levels. So keeping myself strong is partly just like, it's part of the job. And if you don't, then that's when you like step off the stage wrong and you jack up your back, and then you have to sleep in a bus like jiggling down the road with a sore back. So you want to try and avoid that. So I've never been someone that like really loves exercising. I don't know, like people talk about the endorphin highs and everything, and I'm sure that they're real, but I've like never, I've run some, I've never like loved it. But I do it because I know that it makes my life better and physically, and it also is a huge part of my mental health. Like that's a big part of staying sane, is just moving. And it's like the one thing that I know that I like, if I wake up and I'm having a terrible day, like whether I can get myself to go outside or not is the question, but I know that I'll feel better. Always. You never feel worse having coming back from a walk.
No. And with your travel as well, I imagine fitting all of this self-care / must-dos into your schedule can't be as easy as one of us having a bike at home that we jump on quickly to do our thing. So how do you manage that with traveling and moving around?
I think time-wise, it's actually not too difficult on tour. Tour is, my partner is not a musician, and he always jokes that we work for 70 minutes a night. He's like, the rest of the time you're just sitting around on Instagram, which, to be fair, we have a lot of downtime. So the time is not the hard thing. It's like having the fact that every morning we wake up in a different city on the side of the road. Sometimes we're outside a venue that we can get into, sometimes we're not. When I first started touring in the States, like touring professionally, touring a lot, I had a gym membership to a gym that was all around the country. So sometimes I'd spend like $20 each way in an Uber just to be able to go to the gym, to be able to like have my own space, to be able to work out for as long as I wanted to, have a shower, like have my own time. And then that was like, it was expensive, but it was like worth it for the mental well-being of it. Now what I've sort of transitioned into more is just having, working out, like walking and running from wherever the bus is, and then having like a yoga mat with me and doing either yoga or some stretching or some like HIIT workouts. But basically on tour, you just have to make sure that you don't need anything, because you can't guarantee that you'll have it. And sometimes the arenas we were playing on the arena tours were like sports arenas, and occasionally they'd let you use the gyms, which was cool, but you could like never guarantee it. So you can't have a regime that you're like, I must have this machine every day, because the likelihood of you having it's real bad. And if you don't, and it means you don't do it, then everything's thrown off. So I think walking and running are like the ideal tour activities, because you can literally just step off the bus and go, and it doesn't matter where you are. And it's such a cool way to see the cities we're in too. Like I always think it's funny the people that tour and that don't get off the bus, and it's like touring for a living kind of sucks a lot of the time. Like you're away from home, sleeping's hard, like all these downsides of it, but like the upsides are that you're traveling for a living, and it's like if you don't get out there and check out what's out there, I don't understand why people would do it.
And you probably get to see the sites differently than anyone else, because you're sort of not doing the touristy things.
And you never have time to.
You're with the humans who live there day to day.
And you have maybe a couple of hours to, what I'll usually do is just walk around a lot, and I'll have calls and, sit and get coffee and maybe do some emails, but walking and just like being in a new place. But usually it's, from wherever the bus is usually outside the venue, so it's usually in some kind of downtown area, and then it's maybe only a 5K radius that I even adventure into, but just walking around and seeing it, and it's better than nothing. And occasionally, like I went to the Alamo in Texas and actually did the tour with the like little phone guide thing, which I never do that kind of stuff, but I think I just had enough time, and I was like, when will I be here again, you know? So I do try and make the most of it, and maybe it's because I'm not American as well, that some of the people I tour with have already done those things with family, like when they were kids. But I think physically moving is like a mental health thing. For me, it's absolutely the thing that keeps me sane. But it's also just about like making the most of the experience of being wherever I am.
Yeah. It leads us beautifully into mind talking about walking, because you said that walking is a really, really important thing for your mental health.
Yeah.
So talk us through that and sort of what you do when you're walking.
I always have this conundrum with walking, in that I love walking and listening to podcasts. I find it like so relaxing and so interesting. But I also know that when I walk without anything, I have so many good ideas and I process so much of what's going on in life. So I sort of feel like I have to force myself to alternate, because I would happily just like listen to podcasts and and, you know, still have ideas. But I think every good idea I've had about writing, about businesses, about life has come through just walking and letting my brain wander. And I think that processing time is why it's so invaluable to my mental well-being, because I do have a propensity for anxiety, and I'm definitely type A when it comes to wanting to plan and organize everything. I have been joking lately that I'm a recovering control freak, because I used to be real bad at wanting, especially because I was always the person, like I would organize the tours, not the tours that I'm on where I'm just a hired person, because I'm just a cog in the machine, but the tours that my band did and any of the like independent stuff, I would organize it, I would plan everything, I'd be in charge on tour, I'd be tour managing, and I was like horrible to be around, because I needed it, in my mind, like the repercussions of someone being 30 minutes late was that the rest of the day was going to fall apart. And I remember being on a tour in New Zealand with Sai, and then 2 American friends who we toured with a bunch in that first year of moving to Nashville. And Rachel, who's one of my best friends, took me aside and just said, like, I love you, but if you don't find a way to do this differently, you're going to drive yourself into the ground. And I had like stress acne, and I was like I always was grinding my teeth. Like I was so stressed out because I cared so much and I wanted things to be good, and I felt like it all was all on me. And finding a way to let go of that stuff, certainly as I got older, has become a little easier. But I think also I do have a propensity for anxiety and for overthinking, and walking and allowing those thoughts to process themselves is like the single best way that I've found to not delve in, not find myself in those like really just too many ideas, too many thoughts, like can't stop. And I know that people that are into meditation always talk about how like people will say like, oh, walking's my meditation, and meditators are like, meh, that's not how that works. Which I don't think that I'm meditating while I walk, but I do know that I'm allowing those thoughts to clear. And that's really important.
And to be fair, I mean, we've had conversations with a few psychologists now around all of this, and meditation, we all do think it's sitting there going, you know, and taking the 10 minutes and listening to the guided meditations and stuff. But meditation is anything where you can free your mind. So if you're on a bike riding for 20 Ks, or if you're walking, or if you're doing yoga, whatever it is that can calm your mind and get you into that next level kind of calm and of being able to just process, there's no right or wrong. And that's what kind of what we're trying to always just say in everything we do, like what works for someone else doesn't work for the next person. And you can't gauge it off that, but also other people's opinions just don't matter. Like
whatever makes your life better, right?
If you think you're meditating and you're climbing up a skyscraper, I don't care. Like if that, whatever makes you feel the way you want to feel, which is good and calm and like full, then who cares? Now you are incredibly creative, obviously. Many of us aspire to be as creative as you. So how do you keep your mind in that creative space to obviously be looking at new opportunities or writing new things? And what are some of your things that you do to be creative?
When I was thinking about this question before today, I was thinking that the funny thing about what I do day to day is that a lot of it doesn't feel very creative. That like even if I'm a hired musician standing on stage playing music, if it's someone else's band and I'm sort of there as like a session player, even that doesn't feel very creative sometimes. Like it sort of feels like I'm doing my job. I'm playing the right bass line that they want and I'm doing it the same every time because that's the job, like it's, but
Wow.
I think that creativity for me, like, so Tattletale Saints just made a new album and Sai and I produced it, and that was like 4 days of pure creativity, which was so fun that we, a couple of times when we were discussing what we were going to do with a song, we was like a bass solo on one song and I'm like, I don't know, does the world need another bass solo? And Sai's like, Vanessa, this is your album. You get to have a bass solo. But things like that where, there's those moments of creativity. Those 4 days in a row was a lot. But even with writing, and I feel like the businesses that I've run and been involved with, they might not look, I think creativity is across everything. It's not an artistic pursuit. Like you can be the most creative accountant in the world with the way that you pursue what you actually are. The activity doesn't matter so much, it's the mindset. And I think that the moments of creativity for me with writing and with businesses and with music usually come when I'm very intentional about carving out a space for it. So the album creativity came because I said to everyone else in my business and personal life, like, there are 4 days where I'm going to be in the studio for 11 hours a day, and I will tell you I'm alive. But other than that, like, that's what I'm doing. Yeah. And I'm not the best at that kind of focus. Like, I am very good at juggling a lot of stuff, and my natural state is to be like texting and talking to someone and thinking of an email. But what I've learned is that doesn't. I can get everything done, but it doesn't allow creativity. So from a real practical perspective, in terms of like writing creativity, I close all the other tabs because I have a squirrel brain too. Like I'll be like, oh, I wonder what's happening on that social media site, or I wonder what's happening with that. I have 5 email addresses for different things that I'm involved with, and I'll have all of the profiles open on my computer and I'll tab between them. And I've realized that like I just don't get anything done, and anything I do get done sort of sucks, because I'm so like half engaged. So I think walking is like how I process the thoughts to lead to like the creative ideas for, like whether it's, I write a Substack newsletter on music mindset. So I'll think of, like the germ of an idea or a concept I want to talk about, and I'll make a note in my phone. So I'll get like those germs from walking, but then I just have to be real disciplined about like, I'm going to spend the next hour on this one thing, and I'm going to close all the other tabs. And if I do that, I get something good out of it. And when I don't, which I still sometimes I'm just like, it's fine, I'll just leave the email open, just don't get anything done. So I think the busier you get in life and the more, like, it's hard to be like purely creative. Like not many people get to sit around just being like, I'm going to be creative all day. Like that's a luxury that most of us don't have. So I think it's finding a way to like block out a little chunk of time and knowing what your predispositions are, which for me it's like focus. Trying to like, set yourself up for success, right? Like if you know that you keep tabbing between social media platforms, like log off them for a while, close the browsers, do whatever you need to do to actually have that focus.
Boundaries,
Boundaries with yourself.
With yourself, that's the thing.
Boundaries are for you, not for other people.
And that's the thing. We do think often, it'll be all right because I just won't look at it. Yeah,
you're like, no.
And you bloody know.
Yeah, I'm terrible. Like you're like, yeah, right, you're gonna not look at it. Okay. Yeah. We're all addicted.
Classic. I love that. It's so typical of all of us.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of research around it, right? But my favourite thing you just said was close all the tabs. That's like it's like a thing, but it should be something we actually say, like close all the tabs.
Like practical.
Or like tell your team, like, you know what, I'm closing all the tabs. Meaning nobody talk to me for an hour, I need to just focus. So
but I think it's, like I work with musicians, I coach musicians on marketing and mindset. And I think it's like those really simple, practical things that we actually like don't talk about enough. That it's not just, like it's one thing to say to someone like, okay, well, the way that you're going to have more success with building an audience is to be really focused about your time. And it's like, well, what does that actually mean? Like, it means close all the bloody tabs. Like, actually, some practical advice sometimes, like some very simple practical advice goes a long way.
Some standard Kiwi advice from my parents on that would be head down, bum up.
Yes.
I love that. Head down, bum up, get it done. Now, we talk about communities, and we can talk about communities in any, it could be a knitting group, it can be a reading group, it can be a band, it can be a rugby team, we all have different communities within our lives, but something I'm incredibly envious of, to be fair, is the community that you have in Nashville. I am solidly a truck driver's daughter, and I have grown up immersed in country music my whole life. And so hearing about just stories about Nashville, I'm like, tell me more, it's so amazing. So, I watched Nashville, the TV program, and you're just in awe of what that life would be like. So tell us about what it was like to go to Nashville for the first time and find those people and build what now is your community in Nashville.
Well, what's funny is that Scarlett from Nashville was so on the Sugarland tour, it was Sugarland, it was Brandy Clark, and then it was Claire.
Yeah.
So she was actually got to hang out with her for like 6 weeks, and she's very nice. So Nashville came about. I didn't grow up listening to country music. In fact, I was in the car in Nashville one day, driving along, listening to someone singing, and was like, damn, she's really good. And I Shazammed it, and it was Loretta Lynn. I'm like, oh, yeah, that's why she's real good. But I just didn't grow up listening to that. I grew up listening to hip hop and dub and jazz and pop. And it was like not a thing. I remember my dad was into country and western. He was part of the West Auckland Country and Western Club. And I was like, ugh, Dad's music sucks. I don't want to listen to that.
Not another road trip with that.
But I just wasn't into it. And I had never been exposed to it and didn't have any interest. So Sai had grown up really interested in country and rock and blues and bluegrass and just like a bunch of the genres and sort of roots realm. So I got involved with country through him. And then when we'd come back to New Zealand after London, we were looking to record our first Telltale Saints album. And we were at his parents' place in Whangaparoa, and we were kind of throwing around ideas of like, who would be the ultimate producer for this? And it was the two of us as a duo. It was like a real acoustic, stripped back, folky kind of vibe. Sai's songs are he's a fantastic award-winning songwriter, and his songs are very lyric driven, so it lends itself really well to that kind of folk world where words are important. And we threw around some ideas, and we came up with Tim O'Brien, who's this Grammy award-winning bluegrass songwriter and musician. And we were like, he's a Nashville guy. Like, we're like sitting in Whangaparoa, like we don't have any connect with him. We're just like, that's not gonna happen. But we might as well try. So we knew that Jerry Paul, who's a Wellington musician, we knew that he'd worked with Tim, and we were like, we have this one human that's like a bridge to Tim. So we emailed Jerry and said, hey, do you think that if we made a little video message for Tim, do you think you could send it to him? And our idea was, we might be able to woo Tim here with a trip to New Zealand. Because we were like, if we make this like a vacay situation, everyone loves New Zealand, maybe we can bribe him to come out by just giving him a trip. And so we sent him this little video message, which actually for the time was like pretty, we recorded songs and spoke to him on camera, which like video stuff was around, but it wasn't happening a ton. So it was like, at the time, I remember looking back, I'm like, that was a good idea. Because it was better than just sending him MP3s or an email. So we sent him this little video message of a couple of snippets of some of the songs and like why we loved him, why he was the first choice. Jerry sent it to him, and Tim came back and surprisingly to us said, hey, I'd love to produce it, and why don't you come to Nashville? And I don't think it had even occurred to us that we would, I'd never been there before. I don't think Si had been there before either. And we were like, that's crazy. We could, we could look into that. So we end up going there for a month, and we recorded at the studio. Unfortunately, it's now been torn down and turned into apartments because Nashville. So it was a studio owned by John Prine that Johnny Cash had recorded at. It was just so grimy but so cool. It had the original plate reverb from the Grand Ole Opry that when it had been flooded and moved, this huge physical plate that creates the cool reverb sound. They'd moved it to the studio, and it was in the shed out the back. It was nuts. It was so much history. And so we went over there for a month. We went to pick-in parties with some new friends we'd made. We just, it was like Candyland. There was music everywhere. The quality of musicianship was insane. And then on New Year's Day, we'd been to a New Year's Eve party the night before. The New Year's Day, we went downtown to Broadway, went to Robert's, Robert's Western World is one of the best honky-tonks in town. And it was New Year's Day specials where the beer was $1. And it was the best Western swing band I'd ever seen playing on stage with dollar beers. And I was just like, is this place real? Like, have I landed in actual heaven? And we just kind of were like, well, I mean, if we can find a way to swing this, we have to come back and be here, because everyone we met was not only like good at music, like it's not about the fact that they were talented, it's that everyone was like so driven and so passionate, and most people that have come to Nashville have come from somewhere else, and so people have like given up everything in pursuit of this dream of creating music at this really high level. So it was finding the people who are willing to move 10,000 miles to go, do this thing. And I think it was that level of dedication and sort of intensity that I always felt a bit too intense for the Auckland music scene. Like, I wanted things to be done like real right. And I think part of it was also that I hadn't like learned to chill out yet, and I would be different now. But when I got to Nashville, I was like, oh, there's like a bunch of people around me who are equally as crazy about this. And it was amazing. So we came back to New Zealand after recording. We had made friends with another duo who were called 10 String Symphony, who, what we basically, moving to the States is, the hardest thing is the visa. That's like, people will often message me now and be like, we want to come to Nashville. I'm like, what are you going to do about the visa? Because don't make any other plans until you figure that out. So we built this double duo tour with this other duo. They booked the shows in the States for the two bands. I booked a 20 show tour in New Zealand for the two duos, and off the back of that we were able to get a visa, because we could prove that we had like a plan for a year. And then we got from that visa, we then upgraded to a better visa, which allowed us more freedom with the kind of music we could play. From there we got green, like it all tracks from there, but it all started from that one tour. And if we hadn't had that connection with that duo, we wouldn't have been able to do it, because we couldn't have got a visa and we couldn't have, played. So still now, those Rachel and Christian are on the new album. They came and did like some twin fiddle playing for one of the songs. And it's still just the thing about Nashville that I love is not that everyone's good, though there is certainly like a sort of a standard that not that like people are going to be like, you can't come, but just like if you come to Nashville and you're not at a certain level, you just won't get any work, and you won't get any gigs, and you won't, because there's so many great players that you have to be great at what you do and super professional and like able to be a good hang and be not be annoying on the bus when you've been stuck in an airport lounge for 6 hours. Like, you have to have the attitude side of it too. But the thing that I actually love about Nashville is that the community is so supportive, that people are just ready to help each other. People will share contact information for, venues and producers and publications, and will support each other's shows and just help each other. And that is the thing that I'd never really been part of, like a thriving, not to say that there aren't people who are willing to help each other here and in Vegas and in London, like it exists. But Nashville is this concentration of community. And I don't know if it's because it's in the South, and so it started as a small town. It doesn't feel like a small town anymore, but it started being this very small place where people came to pursue country music when country music like wasn't cool. So it has this very, family oriented, like still now they call them weekend warriors, because you do these runs where you go out on a Thursday and you come back usually on a Sunday morning. And the touring was set up that way because people didn't want to be away from their families. So the session world kind of like, and partly that's like a religious thing, that they had this real like family values, and it was all the dudes out on tour. They wanted to come home to their wife and kids. But then in the rock world, which obviously didn't like grow in Nashville, more in LA and New York, you go out for like 6 weeks. You just go out for 6 weeks or 3 months. You don't get to go home once. And I think things like that in Nashville kind of speak to that focus on life and community. And there's still people that are, obsessed and don't have good life balance, of course. But I think that it's really a people-focused place. And I think most people, when they ask me about Nashville, are the most surprised to hear that it's not that competitive. I mean, it's competitive, sure, that everyone's trying to work and trying to, succeed. But I think that because there's so many gigs and there's so many tours and there's so many musicians, that if you come at it with like a really negative competitive attitude, you just won't last. Because I mean, every good gig I've ever got has come from another bass player. So if I was a dick to all those bass players, I wouldn't get any work.
Yeah. And there's a level of that, because I work with elite sportswomen, so it's that same competitiveness. But if that community you've just talked about, it is so amazing to me. If you could uplift that and put that into the sporting realms and into corporate and into all these different spaces where people tear each other down to get just one up, thinking that that's the only opportunity that could possibly be there, so I have to get it, she can't get it, or they can't get it.
Yeah.
And if we can wipe that out, people are so much more available to help and kind, and you can both be in the same industry doing the same thing, but there's enough for all. And it's similar to how you said here you felt almost like a little bit too much in terms of intensity, but you're never too much. And when you find your people, you're not too much, and you're you, and you bring all that you are, and you're enough in those environments, and it's okay to be 100% yourself. And I think that's a huge part of wellbeing, if we can try and get those communities who are just there with kindness and determination to achieve and achieve together.
Yeah, because if you lift, I mean, this is part of some of the stuff that Cassie and I have been working on together in the last 6 months, is like, if you lift up other people, you don't go, we lift each other up all together and everyone rises. Like it's, you don't, we've talked a lot about networking in creative spaces, that people think about networking as climbing a ladder. But the thing is, networking, if you look laterally, like if you look horizontally at the people beside you, those are actually the people, first of all, that you're probably going to get your opportunities from. Even if you feel like you're all at the bottom right now, you're going to grow up together. Brandy Clark, who I play for, is a very, very acclaimed songwriter. She's written songs for every country artist you can think of. And she's been nominated for like 12 Grammys or something. And she talks about how young songwriters always want to write, want to write up. So that means that they want to get someone to go, like, so for her, you know, someone will move to town and be like, I want to write up, I want to write with Brandy. And Brandy said that, she's like, the reason that, first of all, that doesn't work is that people already have their people, they already have their writing partners and friends. And she said the reason that that's important is that you have to write with someone that you're willing to suck in front of, because you can't be creative if you don't have the confidence to throw out some bullshit. That, you know, she always says the line between genius and terrible is like razor thin. But if you're not, if you're too afraid to suck at it, then you're never going to come up with a genius either. But also, it's the same with, like, I always think of Nashville. I mean, this would apply anywhere, but Nashville is like, there's like a graduating class. And I always think that you end up playing with the people who move to town around the same time as you. Because when you move to town, first of all, you all start playing locally, and it kind of separates the wheat from the chaff. And then you're like, okay, well, these are the players that are all really good, but they're also the players that are available because they haven't been picked up yet and taken out on tour. So then you end up playing gigs together, and you kind of find your people, find your friendships. Someone gets a big touring gig, and then that band's like, we need a drummer. So they recommend their friend. And then you all kind of move up and around together. And then the next graduating class moves to town and is like, I think the best thing for people to do is to not think about writing up or networking up, but to embrace the fact that your community is side by side. And if you lift them up, if you reach out to people, and I did this when I was trying really hard to build my touring career, where I would reach out to singers who I loved their music and I knew they had no money, and I said to one of them in particular, like, if this works for you, I think I would be a really good fit for your band. I will work for free for the in-town shows, or cheap if you have some money but not enough. And then as you build, and as you know, and of course, like, if only as and when I can, but like as you build, then when you have more money, then you pay me more, because this will help me get my name out there as a bass player. It'll help you, because I know that every time you play in Nashville, you lose $500. And then it works for both of us, and then you all live together, and then these people, I mean, it's funny that some of those singers that I did that for when we first moved to town, they're like the ones now getting the record deals and getting the bigger tours, and they talk about Nashville as a 10-year town for songwriters, and it's a 5-year town for session players, because session players, it's just easier to kind of build when you're not the star. But it takes a while, and you have to be willing to stick it out. And you also, the best way to do it in my mind, and this is definitely transferable across all industries, is just to, instead of fighting each other, look around and see how you can help each other, because you all win. It's not, as soon as you get rid of that zero-sum scarcity mindset, things get better. There's always more opportunities.
It's an incredibly powerful message. I can't wait for people to hear this. I'm very excited. We'll move to environment.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about the criticalness of home being a place that's really consistent and really stable to really replenish your energy. So talk to us about how you do that amongst all of everything that you do.
Well, so interestingly enough, at the pre-pandemic, I was living in Nashville and my boyfriend was in Wisconsin, and we'd been long distance for a few years. I landed at his house in Wisconsin in March of 2020, thinking that I was going to be there for a week because I had a 3-month tour that was about to start. I'd been in New York doing some TV promo. I flew directly to his place with a carry-on suitcase, like spend a week with him, go out on tour. And then obviously the world shut down. So over the course of the pandemic, I went from living in Nashville and spending like a week with him every month and being on tour to being with him most of the time and being in Nashville like once a month for about a week. So I split my time between the two places, but basically because of COVID, the full time, like where I consider home, shifted. And though it was obviously like I wouldn't have chosen to go through a global pandemic, I actually have started to really value the fact that I come off tour and I go to Nashville for a couple of weeks for studio work or whatever, and I come back to our house in the woods in this really small town, and I actually get to fully reset. And it's made me really appreciate Nashville for what it is, but it's also allowed me to, like, I feel like in Nashville, I'm always I have that buzzy, like, on energy because there's always something happening. There's always gigs to go to. There's always people to see. And I want to do it and I want to be part of it. But I also don't think I was particularly happy or healthy when I was living in Nashville full time. So, So basically now I split my time pretty equally between being on tour, being in Nashville, and being home in Wisconsin. And what I've realized is that even though it was something that happened, like I didn't choose, I mean, I think I always thought in the future I will live in Wisconsin because that's where Jake is, and he's been there for 20 years and it's his home, and I just kind of thought like in the future maybe I'll be full time, but like you don't think about leaving the place that your career is. You don't think it's possible. And actually throughout the pandemic, as we started to, like 2020 we did a couple of live stream weird things. 2021 we did like a little bit of touring and a few more weird live streams. And every time we did some work, I would talk to the people that I was working with and say like, does it matter if I'm not in Nashville? Do you care where I come from, where I'm, based? And they all said like, we don't care where you are as long as you get to the bus on time. Like just do whatever you want. And actually a lot of people I know in Nashville, the fancy people, have homes in LA and Nashville, sometimes in New York. Even the not fancy people sometimes still split their time and go back and forth between places. Because I think the thing about Nashville being a touring hub is that everyone's always somewhere. Like it's not like everyone else is, even during COVID, I would talk to friends in Nashville and be like, I'm missing out. And they're like, nothing is happening. Like everyone is in their homes doing nothing. So the downside of it was that I thought I was going to miss out on stuff. Turns out that's not the case. The upside is that I love living outside of the music bubble. And I love visiting the music bubble and getting to be back in that crazy energy. But actually, we live in this really small community. It's right on Lake Michigan. It actually reminds me a lot of New Zealand culturally, that it's not... Nashville is amazing because everyone cares about the same thing, and it's also like exhausting because everyone cares about the same thing. So we live in the woods in a house that Jake built, and I have a little office that like looks out in the woods, and I've done most of my coaching from there, most of my business building from there, most of my writing. I have basses and amps there, so I do like practice and I learn songs for tours and things. But I think actually the surprise twist for me was that no one cares where I live as long as I get to the tour on time. And actually often they'll fly me back there rather than fly me back to Nashville if it makes more sense. So they're super kind and supportive. And I think it has allowed me to find the mental space and balance that I actually need to keep being a touring musician in the long haul. Because I am somewhat introverted while doing an extroverted job, but I also really need quiet and peace and space, and it was quite hard to find that in the city. So now, the home life we have is a lot quieter, But also Jake is not a musician, which I love because he also reminds me, A, of what's like truly important in life. And, you know, when I'm on tour complaining about catering, and he'll just be like, shut up. Like, that's not a real problem. It's like, yeah, you're right. It's not a real problem. And that also, he's been really helpful in getting me to create boundaries around my time, where he'll want, you know, he runs a business, owns a business, but also is also a carpenter. And so he'll get home from work around 5ish or whatever, and I'll still be at the computer. And in Nashville, I would have just kept working all night if I was busy doing a project. Yeah. And he's been really helpful in getting me to stop and actually like have real boundaries, not just like continue to pick up my phone and reply to people. And I think being with someone outside the industry, it's kind of reminded me of real life outside music, but also one of the hardest things that I had to confront during the pandemic was this idea that if I'm not on stage, then I'm not worthy. If I'm not playing bass, then do I have any value? And even said the words to him at one point, if I'm not a musician, do I have any intrinsic value here? Like, I don't know that there's what's the point of me if I'm not doing this one thing that I've been chasing for 20 years? And he said, well, first of all, you do have value to me. I'm like, well, that's good. But it was hard. And I'm sure this is true of a lot of industries, but I watched my whole industry go through that reckoning of like, we've been on this hamster wheel for decades and now we've suddenly been thrown off it and we're confronted with ourselves. And like, what is important to me if I'm not doing this one thing where I got all of my validation through applause and bright lights, you know? And it's been a real journey, but it's been good because I've realized that my creativity can take many forms, and doing lots of things makes me happy. And I'm a good bass player and I've trained hard to be good at my job, but it's not all I am. Yep. And that's a much healthier way to live, I think.
And that's true of sports people, of women who've been women in corporate jobs and then become mums, and then we hang our hats on this thing that we are. I'm an accountant, I'm this, I'm that, and then when it changes, we're like, identity crisis, you know. And it's really important to know that you can be lots of different things, and that you can interchange as well. So like, you can give something your all for a few years, and you can come away from it, and it doesn't mean that it's gone away, but you can try different things. What are some non-negotiable values that you have that you take with you in any environment, whether you're at work or at home or traveling between countries? Are there any non-negotiable values that you hold tight to in any environment?
I think integrity and following through with your word is the thing. It's the thing that I think is the most important thing to try and live myself, but it's also the thing is the fastest way for someone to like, for me to be like, okay, I'm done with you, is if someone breaks that. And for an example, I think it's really important to talk about money before you do a job. And I don't think it means it's the most important thing. The reason that I think it's important to talk about it is that then you can like put it over there and just focus on the job. And I think it needs to be fair. I think it's important to be paid fairly for what you do and for your time and energy and expertise. And I think also though, I think it's really important to be honest if you've been overpaid, for example, or if you think that you're getting, like, I don't think that means you just get as much as you can. I think it means like looking at things fairly across everything. And the manager of Brandy, one time I was overpaid for one extra show on a tour, and I called her and I said, hey, you've paid me like extra $200. How do you want me to get it back to you? And she didn't reply for a few days, and then she finally emailed and she was like, you are literally so she managed Joan Byers. She's like big time manager across for decades. And she said, in 40 years of managing, you're the first person who's offered to pay back money that has been accidentally overpaid. And I was like, and I said to her, well, I mean, I always expect you to be fair to me, so that's a two-way street. Yep. And it just seemed crazy to me that was like, it was the first time it had happened. And she ultimately was just like, keep it. You just keep it. But that's the thing, is that I don't think integrity is not a one-way thing. It's a two-way thing. And I think that if you lose that, just the foundation of everything is gone. If you don't have a word, it's like also agreeing to do a job and then something better coming along. I've had this happen so many times where I've agreed to something which is like, but it's work, and then something fancy comes along, and I have always stuck with my first decision because I just think that's all you have. And there's musicians in Nashville who do the opposite that I've worked with, who've bailed on bands that I've been involved with, and I've just been like, never hiring you. Because I know that the day before the thing, if you get a better offer, you're going to peace out.
Yeah.
And I don't want to deal with that kind of stress. So I think integrity, and integrity is kind of in some ways is a very broad one that covers a lot of things. But I just think that that's like the one thing that I can't get over. If someone breaks it, and it's the same thing, like if I start to feel like I'm going to make decisions that are not based in integrity, then I have to start questioning if I want to be involved at all, like why? Because it's a massive red flag for me in myself as well as in others.
That's incredible. I'm very proud of you. It's like taking the Kiwi way across to America and being like, you know what, this is legit how we would treat one another.
It seems like a no-brainer. Yeah. It's like, oh, you've paid me too much money. Like, if you paid me not enough money, you sure as hell be hearing from me.
You would also be hearing from me. Now, we talk about portion distortion, and so I truly believe that it wouldn't matter what age you are, what industry you're in, what your life looks like in terms of how many people are in it, or dogs, like anything, we struggle with time. And we all have different struggles with time, but we all struggle with time, and that's our portion distortion. So talk to us about any challenges or things that may have been obstacles for you with time currently or in the past, and if there's anything you've done to sort of any ways you've tried to change it, or anything that you've sort of put in place that's tried to help you manage your time better.
Yeah, it's hard, eh? It's like it's the most valuable commodity.
Yeah.
And it's the one that is so easy to fritter away and then be like, what? Where did the last month go?
Yeah.
I think again, like this is sometimes funny where Cassie and I kind of differ when we're working with people, is that she tends to be very like big picture, concepts, and I'm very much like, what is the practical advice here? And I think for the practical advice that I would give people is that kind of speaking to what we talked about before with focus, is that I think it's about being real intentional with the actual use of the time that you have, because like I'm self-employed, generally speaking, I have free reign over all of my time. But actually that sucks because it means there's no boundaries or like, there's no walls around anything. Yeah. So I can literally frit away a whole day because no one's going like, what are you doing? Time blocking, which I think is sometimes called, there's another name for it, but I'd learned about it in terms of time blocking, where in the morning you sit down and you go like, I'm going to spend 30 minutes on emails, and then I'm going to spend 1 hour working on this project, and then I'm going to spend 30 minutes on emails again, and like having these very just specific chunks of time that you actually do time. The reason that seems to work for me is that it motivates me, because I'm like, oh shit, I got, like you have to be realistic about how you plan it out. Yeah. But I'll look at it and go like, okay, I could write this blog post in 1 hour if I just get my shit together. But if I know that I have all day, I'll mess around on the internet and do some shopping and look at social media, and then and then at the end of the day I'll be like, oh, I don't have time anymore. So time blocking kind of gives me the deadline motivation that I need. Some people don't need deadlines to work well. Like I was always the kid in high school that would do the project the night before. Like I was never the person that went home and like, I'm going to work 20 minutes a day on this thing. Like I needed to have the looming deadline to get the motivation to do it. I'm really impressed with people that can just plan out, their time better than that. But that kind of like self-imposed deadline, which is funny because even though I created it, like it still works.
Yep.
And it also helps you to then go through and actually have a sense of accomplishment too at the end of the day, which also I think working for yourself or not, like it's just, if you have your own, basically any job that you can kind of have some self-guided time. I think it's hard to also feel at the end of the day like you've done anything sometimes, and then you get down about that, and then the next day is harder, and so actually like blocking out time like that has been really helpful for me. And I think also trying to be really honest about my limitations and my like bad habits. Yep. And like I'm currently off social media for a month because I was just like, I just need a break. I'm on it, and I put a lot of energy into trying to create posts and content that can help other people, and I get some good feedback from people that it's, you know, there's helpful stuff in there, but it's also like very exhausting and emotionally draining, and I just needed a break from it. But even when I'm in that, I know I'm like, I can get sucked into it. I know that I'm just super easily distracted. So if you are struggling to get shit done, look at what's stopping you from getting it done, and then don't, like we said before, don't just say to yourself, oh, I just won't open Facebook. It's like, yes, you will.
You will.
Like you have you have to log out and change the password and give it to someone else. Because whatever it takes, like be honest about what your own problems are, you know, your bad habits, and then try and find ways to actually break them. Yeah. Otherwise, you're just in a bad cycle, right?
Have you heard of David Galbraith?
Yeah.
He's fantastic. DG, where's my camera? DG, you're the man. I'm currently reading his book, which is long overdue, but and we've talked to him about it before anyway, but he calls bullshit, and I love it. And he's, you know, there's bullshit world or real world. Where are you living? And so like saying to yourself, I'm not going to open Facebook, so it's all right, I can sit there.
Yeah.
Bullshit. You know, or knowing that you're a procrastinator and not doing time blocking, for example.
Right.
Bullshit.
I'm a massive procrastinator.
You know, and then there's a guy called Robin Sharma. I've just finished reading his book called The Everyday Hero Manifesto. And he talks about you would never, and it's your integrity that you just talked about, you'd never break a promise to anybody else. Why do you break it to yourself?
Yeah.
You know, and that was like a light bulb moment to me. No, I wouldn't. And I was saying I'm going to do, I don't know, get up earlier and exercise or whatever. And then the time would come and be like, one of the kids is awake, so, you know, I'll sleep through and I won't get up and do a walk. No, because if I told someone else I was going to do that, I would be there for them. Why am I not showing up for myself? And so it's just changed the game for me on that awareness and to call bullshit.
Yeah.
And you know, that's DG's like bottom layer really is calling it and setting beautiful, giant, massive, almost unachievable goals. And you should set a goal like Sir Edmund Hillary did, you know, I'm going to climb Everest. And nobody thought that was possible. And he said, if no one's laughing at your dream, it's not big enough.
Right.
But your daily stuff to achieve must be realistic.
Yeah.
So don't go, and I'm going to have 15-minute breaks here, and I'm going to do half an hour here, and then you've set yourself up to fail. You want to achieve and move towards your goals. So it's...
Yeah, and build in time for the stuff that, like if you know that you want to spend 30 minutes like scrolling through Instagram, then like build it into your time blocking. Yeah. But then stop at 30 minutes.
Yep. Yeah. And that's the hard thing. It's like 5 more just in case anything else is interesting. 5 more just...
5 more cat videos.
What else? Now, I already know the answer to this question, but how important, so we dread a lot of stuff in our lives, and a lot of stuff brings us joy, and often we seem to do the stuff that brings us dread, and not a lot of the stuff that brings us joy, because the dread's what we have to do, you know, whether it's cooking dinner or whatever it is in our lives. But how important is it for you to do things that bring you joy?
Yeah, I would say important, but also, like you said, I also don't. Yeah. Like, it's such a funny, we're such funny animals.
Yeah.
That I think I have a tendency to live in the future joy.
Yeah. And
do the things and get stuck doing the things day to day that like could get me there maybe. But I know that I have a very, I'm lucky to have a life that I get to do. I mean, I started playing bass when I was 15 in high school with friends. Yeah. Like I loved it. It was the most fun. I actually was a very serious oboe player at the time, and bass was like my fun thing.
Wow.
And then when I was about 18, I was like, maybe I could just do the fun thing all the time. Yeah. So I'm very aware that getting to play music for a living, yes, there are difficulties, and yes, it's not all, you know, it's not all just fun. There's some challenges, but it's also like a real fun job.
Yeah.
And I'm very lucky that I get to do that for a job. So I think I get many moments of joy just in what I do musically, which I'm very grateful for. I really, really like writing, and it is only through the pandemic that I've realized, I mean, it's really recently actually, I've been publishing pieces in New Zealand Musician magazine for a couple of years, and I've got this newsletter that I put out once a week, and I've written a lot, and it's taken me a long time of doing that to even remotely start saying that I'm a writer, because I just didn't identify with it. All I thought writing was like processing thoughts. Yeah. And it was when I started sharing them with people and they were like, oh, that's really helpful to me. It was like, oh, okay, well, I could keep doing that then.
Yeah.
But I find that really, I don't know if joy is actually the right word, but I find it very therapeutic and very grounding, which sort of feels joyful. But I also, you know, I love getting outside. I love being in my thoughts, out alone, walking, but I also love, my partner and I joke that we, like, our love language is definitely arguing, but we argue on the same side of the point, always. We'll be like, no, I'm more right. No, I'm more right. No, I'm more right because of this. Like, no, I agree with you, but I'm more right. And I think having really good people in your life is super important. You don't need many. You know, you just need a couple of really good friends. I love having friends that I disagree with, that I respect and care about the same things, but from different angles. I love having friends that I do agree with, that I can, you know, we can process ideas with. Cassie and I talk a lot about similar concepts, about, you know, what's important in life. About, we've both agreed that we've hitched our ladders to the wrong buildings a few times and got to the top and looked around at what we thought was the ultimate, and then looked around and been like, oh, this is the wrong building. Shit. Gotta find a new building. But, you know, I mean, I think it's maybe that stage of life too, where you're just like, I've been pursuing this one dream for a long time, and then you look around having sort of ostensibly, you know, reached it, and then look around and go, well, what now? Yeah. What's important now? But I think the people in my life are probably the most important as far as that. I truly love playing music still, in a way that the pandemic also reminded me of that, because it took it away. And the first time I got to be back on stage again, Jake was there, and Jake said, look, you're happy with me, but you're happy in a way that I never see when you're on stage. Like, because it's this connection with the other musicians on stage, with people in the crowd, and it is unparalleled for me still. And I'm really lucky that I found that really young. I know that doesn't happen for a lot of people, but it's still, even after all these years of like some of the bullshit that goes along with the industry, the act of playing music is still probably my first love, which is, you know, I am very grateful for.
It's magic. Magic. Now I have some quick fire questions for you. What are 3 things that made you smile today?
Being home, being in my best friend's house, and caramel chocolate.
Which,
I mean, it's the best.
What a Kiwiism for... what are some of your favourite books?
You know, I read such a weird, wide, diverse range of books that some of the books I love, I love the Outlander series. Yeah. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that, but my actual favourite book was recommended to me by Cassie, and she has apparently given it to like 30 people. But Dictionary of Lost Words by Pitt Williams, and I love it because sometimes a book, like, I read books just because of the entertainment value. Like, I think of reading as just like a pastime. I recently joined a book club, and it's been forcing me to read books outside of my go-to, which is actually really good. I'm reading a book right now about bogs. It's a climate change book, and I must say I'm not loving it, but I'm reading it because book club made me, and I'm learning some stuff, so that's good. But the Dictionary of Lost Words is changed the way I think about language, because it's about the way dictionaries were always written by men. And it's like, of course that's obvious.
Of course, yeah.
But it like never occurred to me that literally meant that words that women used were deemed not legitimate and thrown in the trash. And it's like, that's crazy. Yep. It blew, and it's a great book, and it's a great story. It's a great tale, you know, it's got a really nice story arc, but it's also just like, when a book comes along and it changes the way you think about an entire thing, that's something worth recommending.
Pretty powerful. What is your best travelling tip?
Find a way to have routines. I think that's why I stay sane on tour, is that I have, in the morning I get up and walk. I have like a very specific facial cleaning regime that I do every night. That I honestly think it's finding, we often on the bus will bring our own coffee, like we'll collectively as a band be like, who's bringing the grinder, who's bringing the, you know, the whatever, the Swiss Gold or the French press, but we'll bring stuff so that you can do some of your own home routine still. I think if you can find a couple of places in the day to have your own little routine that's always the same, it like bookends some stability. And traveling is great because it's different every day, but it's also like, that's exhausting. You know, so having a few little routines, even if they're like, it doesn't have to be coffee and cleaning your face, but whatever it is that you can do every day the same, find something, and that makes you just feel a little bit less manic.
Yeah. What word do you have a hard time pronouncing?
Well, this is very timely because next week we are doing the Tongariro crossing, and I speak real fast, and Tongariro is really hard to say. And I'm also real conscious of how much I'm like butchering the pronunciation every time I like, "Bleh." So that word right now is tough because I've been saying it every day to people because we're going to go do that next week.
You're going to have an amazing time. What is your go-to karaoke song?
Angel from Montgomery.
Nice.
I love that song. I love Bonnie Raitt. She's my like, I always talk about integrity before. If Bonnie called, it doesn't matter who I'm with.
No,
I'm out.
Bets are off.
Like if I got to play with that woman, I just love her.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here. You'll know where she is. What's your favourite board game?
I don't play board games that often, but in the last week up at Mum's place in Northland, we've been playing Trivial Pursuit. Nice. And it's really fun. Although we found this weird 2000s version that what we discovered partway through is that it was like real Australia heavy. Oh. And so Jake, who's American, is like, this is so not fair because this is like not only 2000s culture, but like specific to the Antipodes. It was fun though, and I won.
For travelling, try Monopoly Deal. It's my tip
Oh,
of
yeah?
the day. It's
Okay.
great. We've been playing it for 13 years since we got married, and it's just that game that now our kids play. It's so fun.
That's good.
And quick. Qualities you love about yourself?
This is something that I think I love, and also it's hard sometimes, is that I am very honest. And I find it really hard to hide my feelings on my face. And I think being honest with myself and with other people is a good thing. I think as I've got older, I've had to learn that there's a time and a place for it. But I am good at self-analyzing what is going on with myself and being very harshly honest with myself. And I think that's why also I've been a good teacher over the years, is that I'm good at being honest and open, but also like being able to analyze things and share the concepts with other people, which I think is it can be really hard to do that. It can be hard to delve into the why underneath the obvious what. Yep. And that's something that I think does come more naturally to me, but is also, it can be a good thing and a bad thing. Yep. But you've got to find the way to harness it.
Absolutely, I love that. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome.
I can't wait to share so many great tidbits. And I honestly think one of my favourite parts is just close the tabs.
Yeah.
Close all the tabs.
Close the tabs.
That's literally...
Could be like mentally as well.
Literally, yeah, literally. Stop worrying about, even when you're trying to go to sleep, and you're like, all of a sudden, all
hard.
these stupid things, just close the tabs.
Yeah.
Close the tabs and just focus on that thing. I think that's a great message, and I'm seriously going to start this my 2023 phrase of the year, I think.
Close the tabs, I love it.
Yeah, but thank you so much for your time, and thank you. I hope you enjoy the Tongariro crossing next week. It's going to be amazing.
To do it. I'm really worried about weather, but I mean, I think
prepare for all, regardless of weather. Take all four appropriate attires because you'll get it all. But thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I hope everybody enjoys this interview. Please let us know what you think. There's plenty of other ones also on our website, so take a look. But thank you again, Vanessa, and we'll see you again. Ka kite.